panelists here are going to speak to you. Each will have about 3 minutes, and I've been asked to introduce all of them at one time, and then they can just move into their talk when it's their turn to speak. So in no particular order, our first speaker, our speaker is Cheryl Cutledge. Cheryl is currently the Director of Campus Ministry and the Religious Studies Department Chair at Christ the King Jesuit College Preparatory High School on Chicago's West Side. Cheryl received a Master of Divinity degree right here at CTU. We also have Andrew Like. Mr. Like is the director of the Office for Black Catholics in the Archdiocese of Chicago. He has that role from 1999 through 2009. He was the coordinator of marriage ministry for the Archdiocese and the principal writer of the Spirit of Cana, the marriage ministry guidelines for the Archdiocese of Chicago. Michael Noser is our third panelist. Michael holds a BS in mechanical engineering from the United States Naval Academy and an MA in social justice from Loyola University. That's kind of a range, I think. Michael has been actively engaged in the Ignatian Spirituality Project and is a member and former board chair of the Brother David Darst Center for Justice and Peace, Spirituality, and Education on the west side of Chicago. Next, we'll have Joshua Van Cleef. Joshua is the coordinator of the Post-Detention Accompaniment Network, which is an alternative to detention program of the Interfaith Committee for Detained Immigrants. He also is an active worker active in worker and economic justice. He is also a graduate of CTU and the Virginia Military Institute and continues to understand his call to ministry as equal to a call to social justice. And finally, we have Darius Villalobos, who is the director of the Young Adult Ministry Office of the Archdiocese of Chicago. He spent the last 4 years working in the Office for Catechesis and Youth Ministry in the Archdiocese as the Vicariate II Youth Ministry Coordinator. Darius has worked as a parish coordinator of youth ministry, RCIA program coordinator, confirmation catechist, retreat director, and choir director. We have an amazing array of backgrounds and gifts, and I can't wait to hear them each tell their story of how they got to where they are today, which is specifically in front of you. So we will begin hearing their stories of leveraging your voice to lead, best practices in the job search. Thank you.
Good morning. So I'm Darius Villalobos. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm also, not in my bio, a current student here at CTU working on my master's degree. So it's a pleasure to be here and be able to share whatever words of wisdom that I might have. I actually mentioned to some of the panelists earlier, I'm probably not the ideal person for this particular panel because most of the professional ministry positions I've held, I've often been recruited for rather than had to go out and search. But there's definitely some aspects to it that I think are really important for us to keep in mind, whether you're looking for a position or at a point where you're thinking about transitions. One of the most important aspects about listening to your voice in the process of looking for a new position in ministry is really that process of discernment that we talked about earlier. And what is discernment more than anything is it's prayer. And so the most important thing that we can do when looking at making a transition either into ministry or into a new ministerial position is to pray. And there's a lot of aspects to it because discernment isn't just a conversation with you and God. It's not just an opportunity to let the Holy Spirit work in your life. It's also a conversation with other people in your life. And so whenever we make these type of decisions, it's not enough to just go into a corner and say, God, please give me the right job and open up the right opportunity for me. We need to be really self-aware in what we do. And part of that self-awareness means trusting and talking to the people who know us best. Whether that's people that we've worked in ministry with before, whether that's going to a spiritual director, whether that's talking to your friends and family and saying, I'm thinking of making this change and move. Do you think this is the right fit for me? If we don't have that openness to dialogue, we don't really let the Spirit work in the ways that we should. Because the Spirit doesn't just work in our own private time, it works through the people around us who love us and care for us and want to see us thrive and succeed in whatever work and ministry that we're doing. I mentioned self-awareness. Self-awareness is a huge part of any discernment process. And it's really important for you to know what are your gifts and what are the things that you're not good at. And oftentimes the best deciding factor of whether you want to interview a position or take an offer for a position is to know if this is the right thing for me. And I often tell people you have to be very honest when you go in for an interview or you go to talk to someone about a position, because if you are not, you may end up having someone look at you as the best candidate for a job and you're not. And that hurts their ministry, but it also can hurt you. Because if you don't have the proper skills or the proper disposition to be able to do a certain job, don't pretend like you do. Don't fake it and hope that you can make it, because at the end of the day, you're only putting your own spiritual self in jeopardy as well as the spirituality of those that you will be ministering to. And so honesty is key, and it's okay to say, I'm not good at something. A lot of people will think that may hurt you getting a job. And the reality is that honesty is really, really important. And the last thing I'll say is, you definitely want to know, where are you going? And having a vision and an understanding of your own mission as a minister is really key in discerning what's the right place to go for you. If you don't know where you want to go, then any job that comes your way may sound like the right thing, but it may not be where God wants you to be. And I think those aspects are really important to any process of looking for a new position in ministry or to start a position in ministry. Thank you.
I think I'll just sit if everybody's comfortable. It might get the shuffle might be difficult. Michael Noser. I don't think this was in my bio, but I work for Charis Ministries now, which is an Ignatian ministry with those in their 20s and 30s, and specifically I'm the military partner coordinator, so I try to bring the gifts of Ignatian spirituality to young adults on active duty. I could echo Darius's fact that I don't know that I'm a great person to have on this panel. Probably everybody's going to say that, because I don't think anybody's job search ever goes ideally. People that might connect with my experience, could be anyone, but people particularly who are doing a career shift. My background over the last 10 or 15 years was military. Then I went to get a graduate degree in social justice from Loyola. I couldn't find a job working in ministry, so I started working in a bank. I did that for 6 years, and I've been at Charis for 2 years. So it's not exactly how I would have planned it out, but I think in terms of relevance to this panel, that's the high-level snapshot. But what I was reminded of in preparing for this was friends that I'd made, particularly when I was at Loyola and through some community organizing work that I was doing. These organizers formed a group called Dream Job Chicago. Has anybody in the room heard of it? It was a really small group. It was fascinating that these guys put together this curriculum. They looked around at the beginning of the kind of economic crisis and looked at their peers, other young adults, and realized that it was just a nightmare for people getting out of graduate school or getting out of undergrad and looking for work, not just in ministry or in nonprofit, but all over. And they didn't like the job search as it was. And so they created something new, which was Dream Job. But I think to summarize, they talked about the job search as it is, and the job search as it could be or as it should be. And I always described it as vocational discernment in community. So we developed a curriculum. We worked together with other what we call Dream Job Fellows, and we met over a period of months, and we did things differently than you would on a typical job search. For a couple of years when I was looking for work, when I was working in the bank and trying to get my foot in the door in ministry, I was doing kind of the typical easy thing, sending in resumes, looking on idealist.org, going through the Loyola website, and I was, lo and behold, I wasn't getting all these positions that I thought I was really well qualified for. I have a great resume, I went to good schools, I have all this experience, I managed 70 people and millions of dollars in equipment. I couldn't get a job in campus ministry, and not to say that those are the same things, but I felt like I had a good background, and maybe a lot of people feel the same way. Why can't I get a job? But I wasn't doing things that were difficult. Some of the comparisons that I liked from just sort of the introduction to Dream Job was the job search as it is, we do it alone, and in Dream Job, we do it in communion, in community. The job search as it is fear, and Dream Job, we have courage, so we do the difficult things. I mentioned easy, we do the hard stuff, and zero sum versus small victories. And so rather than I got the job or I didn't, figure out ways that I can kind of get further along doing something that's really my calling or my vocation. So maybe that gives you a background on something to ask questions on. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Joshua Van Cleef. So we were given a few prompts for how to frame what we have 3 minutes. One of them particularly struck me for people who are not on their second career. It was, and even in your second career, how do you deal with despair or discouragement in not finding a job or not finding what you're looking for? I'll just say this about myself and how I worked with that. I currently employed by the Interfaith Committee for Detained Immigrants, but as you're going to hear, it's hard. It's going to be very difficult finding a job. So the first thing is that it's really not. It's not that your degree is not necessary or needed, because it is. And it's not because you're not doing a good job. But the reality is, creating good, sustainable jobs in ministry is the work of justice, and it's not optional. So when we don't do that as church, it becomes very difficult for young people and people on second jobs. So I would just say that discouragement, for me, leads to creative dissatisfaction, which would be a Mary Hilgert term, and then to conviction that we have to also be job creators. So then that's also part of my vocation, is to hopefully make good jobs. The second thing I wanted to just mention, oftentimes people talk about networking, and we think about that going to parties and then shameless self-promotion and meeting people and smiling and bad jokes. I would just, maybe a shift has been helpful for me, is mission-centered networking. We may not have all of the job history, but we have ministry history, and this is really important. And in each ministry, if we build a strong network based on the mission, and we go and we step boldly into ministry and try new ministries, and really ministries of passion for us, then we develop communities of coalitions of our people in ministry, and we collect them like chapters in a thesis. And then when it comes time for looking for a job, they're going to be your great resource. And then when it comes time when you're in a job, they're going to be your great resource. And some of you know this because in my work now, my CTU community is one of my great resources. The workers that I've helped organize are a great resource. And all of the ministries I've been a part of have been a great resource. So maybe just a shift in thinking. It's not about networking and self-promotion and really just short-sighted resources. It's actually about the fact that there aren't jobs. There are not many jobs. So if you get a job, you're not going to have much help. So you're going to need to have a strong coalition to be successful. And I know that in my job, as I've progressed, it's been mainly because of the the people that I continue to be connected with that have both helped me get the job and grow. Thank you.
I'm Andrew Like. Just a point of clarity, I am currently the director of the Office for Black Catholics, a position I've had since 2011. I began working for the Archdiocese as the coordinator of marriage ministry in 1999 and held that position for 10 years. I too, just as Darius and others have said, I don't know if my own journey is one that's exemplary of good discernment around how do you search for a job, because every position I've held in the 20 years that I've been involved in full-time ministry, I have been recruited for. That isn't to say that I haven't applied for other positions, and that doesn't say also that I've taken every job that I've been recruited for. But nonetheless, I think I've learned some things along the way. For me personally, that what I try to do is to always be in discernment about who I am and what I'm doing and the gifts that I bring and my lackings, open to new things, open to new experiences, but knowing when to say no, knowing when something is over my head. I'm open to trying some new things, but I let whoever's asking me to know that's not my expertise. I got an opinion. Are you open to my opinion? I'm open to learning, but to be honest with myself. So it's a matter of bringing my own integrity to whatever it is that I'm doing. But to really talk about that, I have to go back. My wife and I, tomorrow, will be celebrating 38 years of marriage. And you're cutting into my time here. But we married right after kindergarten. And, but it was through that experience of marriage that really brought me into ministry. And I won't go through all of it, but it was the ups and downs, the highs and the lows of married life that revealed God to me. And I find that in whatever it is that I am doing, there will be those ups and downs and those highs and lows. And I always need to be looking for God in that. I had an experience in 1992 that was pivotal, that my uncle, who was a dear friend and mentor and role model in my life, was dying of cancer. And my younger brother, who at the tender age of 28 was dying of AIDS at the same time. And it was a difficult period. It was a dark period in my life. And I remember something my uncle told me on my last visit with him a couple months before he died, that I was telling him how difficult their struggles were for me. And he said, it sounds like all you're doing is worrying, and you can't worry and pray at the same time. And I found over those next few months that there were plenty of reasons to worry. And every time I found myself in worry, it was an invitation from my Uncle Jim to pray. And it was a very spiritual journey, a dark journey, but very spiritual. And when they died a week apart from each other at the end of that year, there was something that was changed in me because of that intimacy with God that I had in that journey. I know I couldn't work for the phone company anymore. I didn't know what it was. I know Terry and I were involved in marriage ministry, and we were called to something. But I knew that there was a burning in the gut that I had to follow. And so in doing so, I found myself connecting with a lot of amazing people, institutions who were very supportive, offered guidance, and were part of that discernment with me. And so if there's anything I can suggest to you, is to be open. Don't say yes to everything, but be open, be prayerful. I'm a prayerful person. I pray daily, hourly, minute by minute, because of that journey with God that I had developed during that very dark period. So be prayerful and be authentic. And I believe that God will guide you. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Cheryl Catledge, and as stated before, I am the Director of Campus Ministry. Can you hear me? A little closer? Okay. Wow. Can you hear me now? Awesome. Okay. Again, I'm Cheryl Catledge. I am the Director of Campus Ministry at Christ the King Jesuit College Preparatory High School. I've been there it's been 4.5 years now, and before that, I was at the Notre Dame High School for Girls, also in the same position, and I was there for 2 years. And I must say, on this journey, I've had a lot of lessons, a lot of heartache, but the main lesson I've learned is follow God's plan. Follow God's plan, and that's kind of like my message, and that's been my life learning experience. Before I was even in ministry, I never really had a dream ever being a campus minister. I never really dreamed of being in the classroom. I also teach religious studies at Christ the King. And before that, I had the plan of working in the hospital and marrying Michael Jackson. That was my plan. That was my life goal plan. Well, the Michael Jackson thing kind of fell through. Okay, and I did work in the medical field for a number of years, but after some tragedies in my family, my desire started to shift, and the desire for ministry started to arise, and my desire for being in that medical field started to fall. And so that's kind of how I landed where I am. I really wasn't searching for a job at the time. It kind of accidentally found me. What happened was I had my dear friend, Deacon Julius Frazier, sent me an email. He was the campus minister at Notre Dame High School for Girls at the time, and he was leaving that position and wanted to see that I wanted. I kind of deleted that email. I said, I don't want to be a campus minister. And the email came to me again in about 3 weeks, and I said, oh, okay, let me just read the email thoroughly again. And then I read it, and I called him to see, tell me about the position you're advertising. Tell me about this. And he did. I submitted my resume, and to make a long story short, I did receive that job at Notre Dame High School for Girls. It wasn't the most appetizing career turn that I wanted, but that is something that I really learned about God, is what he usually calls you to is not like a bed of roses. It's not the plan that you had, but it's still God's plan. And we need to really discern if this is what God is calling me to. So that is my lifelong message that I sometimes still struggle with, because sometimes I can be stubborn. I can be hard-headed, and I have to kind of just sit and be still and listen to what God is calling me to. And then I find out later, and I can rejoice, that I am so grateful that I put down that stubbornness and listen. Thank you.
Well, as I was listening to all of the stories, a poster from the 60s came to mind. It was a Corita Kent poster with a big old orange footprint, and the quote was from Louis Evely that said, "The sign of God is that we will be led where we didn't plan to go." And I think that everyone on our panel has told stories of that big old orange footprint, and told stories, I think, that are summarized in the words of another book from the 60s or 70s. Can you guess what age I came from? Surprised by the Spirit. And I think that that's a powerful message that we're hearing this morning from our panelists. I'm sure that the great wisdom that was shared with us in these last few minutes has brought things to your mind, questions, comments, maybe your own experiences. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you're ready to speak, come to this microphone here and speak into the mic, address the panelists individually or as a group, and then they will jump in and have some dialogue with you. So jump in, don't be shy. A thought, I had a question actually that kind of came to mind, and it was something that I think Joshua talked about, networking, and it seemed to me that networking is kind of a now fancy schmancy mechanical word for community building. So I would wonder if any of you would like to speak to that topic of networking as community building, or also the panelists, if you could use that as kind of a springboard to give us a little of your insights along those lines. Just
I could, in my experience in this, I hadn't thought about Dream Job for years, but it was a great little community, and it went for a few months, and a lot of people got dream jobs, and then it kind of died because there was nobody to run it anymore. We were all volunteering. But we said networking versus building relationships, networking versus relationships. And so what we did was, instead of doing everything online, you met face-to-face, and we did things as a group. So we had the 15 people that we were doing this program with, but then we were in smaller groups, and really talking about what our vision was, what we wanted to be doing, and then seeing who each other knew. So it wasn't just, it wasn't as impersonal. So it really was building community, and that was, I think, effective.
thank you. Other panelists want to comment on that?
Yes, certainly. I think that if there's any strength that I have, one of them is certainly networking. It's natural. I don't know. I can't even identify the skills with it, but being able to connect with people, and connecting with people of various walks in life, recognizing and knowing what my strengths are, knowing what my weaknesses are. I can build a good team because I'll look for people who have what I don't have, and that's based on those connections I've made through that kind of relationship building and knowing those strengths that are out there. I think that's critical in ministry. Again, we can be part of something wonderful that I can't do alone, but I can assemble a team of folks who can do it, and that comes from, excellent networking.
Just to add something to the idea of networking, I know some people, when they're at school or they have a job, thinking about going to meet people and shaking hands, like that is just one, that can be overwhelming, but it's just one way of networking. Actually, my best prompt for networking, or the kind of animator, was while I was doing something full-time, the very thing that distracted me from that and brought me into ministry. Like those ministries, the ministries that aren't on the books, but maybe going to work. Personally, it's working with a living wage campaign, or workers, or helping out at 8th Day, building those communities, being on the 8th Day Young Adult Board, cultivating relationships with people at CTU and their ministries. And that's networking, because it's going to be those relationships, and as you cultivate them, they become your team moving forward in the greater ministry of the church. And you're going to have to call upon all those people to help you, and then they're going to call upon you, and they're going to help you get a job, and they're going to work that way. So even think about networking in terms of going after ministries, just because you're passionate about them, and the jobs will come, but go there because that's what you believe in, and cultivate a vibrant community around that, and now you have people working for you and the kingdom that will actually be your greatest network.
I just want to echo what he said. I kind of think I wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for networking. because I was asked by my Tolton scholar, fellow Tolton scholar. I am a Tolton alum here at CTU, and I have networked with several people just in the Tolton program and beyond in the Archdiocese of Chicago. I've also worked with Mr. Like and Mr. Darius as well, with retreats with different teens, with different committees on the Black Liturgy team. So it really has been helpful, and it has been a gift. It has been a blessing, I would say, when I get to know different people in the Archdiocese, and they also have my back. Thank you.
One of the important things about networking, too, is that oftentimes we think about it as us putting ourselves out there for people to know us. But listening is probably the most important skill in doing good networking, because it's the things that you remember about someone that down the road is what's going to help make or recreate that connection that will allow you to think creatively about opportunities that might be there. You may not know where God is calling you in that moment, but again, God works through other people. And so when you go back and have that conversation with that person who happened to work at a particular parish or happened to be working in a particular ministry, and they've moved on somewhere else, the fact that you can remember and restart that relationship often can be a door, can be an opening that you weren't expecting. The relationships that I built with people who I considered my friends and mentors and that I learned so much from often were the ways that I had other opportunities moving forward in growing in my own ministry. It doesn't necessarily mean just either a job. Sometimes it's education. Sometimes it's opportunities for formation. Sometimes it's opportunities to meet other people who might help you get where God wants you to be. So listening is so key and so important to anything that we're doing, but particularly in that relationship building piece in networking.
Another common theme that I'm hearing is wisdom. I think there's a great deal of wisdom at this table, at this panel, and I would again offer the invitation to come on down.
For agreeing to participate in panel. In regards to networking, one of the things that I found that interests me is my generation and the generations that follow tend to think of networking as an opportunity to, install your cousins, uncles, fathers, brothers, nieces, nephews, best friend into a position simply because that surface relationship is there. But I wonder what you all as panelists think about the prospect for reappropriating the term networking and really connecting it to a deeper level of relationship with people. Because one of the things that I found is that you may not recognize that you're being watched, but as you do things, as you cultivate relationship, you are being watched. And as it's been said previously, people are taking note. They are becoming aware of your presence, of how you do things, of why you do things, of the way that you do things. And so I think when we think about the concept of networking, and we think about the concept in relationship in connecting with networking, we also have to think about and be concentrated on what it means to do something and do something to the best of your ability. Not because you're being watched, but as Joshua pointed out, because the passion is there.
So panelists, respond.
Thank you for bringing that up. One thing that just came to my mind really strongly is God places people in your path or in your life for a reason. The person, like you said, your family members, your cousins, your brother or whoever, they may not have the gift that you're seeking or looking for. And I kind of think other people sometimes see my gifts better than I do, and that they can be really honest about it. So that's something that's appreciative, honesty. So please keep that in mind, that the people that you meet, it could be God is moving you into the right direction. to reach that goal?
I think also the term networking has this connotation, it's superficial. It's the cocktail party where you're just a butterfly and you're collecting business cards and you have the little chit chat and so forth. Or it's something that you're doing in the social media where you really don't know people, you just know what they say about themselves. And all of that's good. I'm not putting any of it down because I do all that. But I think the real networking that I value is what happens after that. The follow-ups. I got that business card, and I remember that conversation. Something about this person intrigued me, and I follow up, and I do a one-on-one, face-to-face with that person, where I find out what is their self-interest, what really is, where do they get their cookies? And when something happens in my world of work where I could use someone like that, I remember that, So it's in the relationships that we develop. So it's not the superficial cocktail set. And I think that's really important. You can do that and have fun. If it's something superficial you're looking for, like skiing clubs and things like that, that's fine too. In fact, I encourage it. Something that I do that keeps me healthy in my work in ministry is create some boundaries for myself. I keep a good crop of heathen friends. I do, and it keeps me healthy. Thursday night, I'm a karaoke DJ. It keeps me healthy so that I can come to this work of ministry with passion and depth, because I'm not spent, and overextended. I make sure I get my playtime in.
Something that I'll just quickly mention on this is I think that the levels of networking are really important. And you can also, if this is helpful, think about, instead of being position-centered, like, oh, this person, I'm trying to, they have a position open, I want this position. If you're mission-centered, about like, all right, this is the mission, and then you can be honest and say, this is where I see myself plugging in. This is where I can help. This is your mission, this is where I can help, rather than trying to just think, oh, I need this position, because people, they're looking, especially in this ministry, they're looking for someone much bigger than the exact position you're going to get hired for. They're looking for someone to take this on. And as this grows, as the life professional ministry grows in the Catholic Church, to lead. So I would just say that when we network, it can be good to be focused on the passion of the actual mission, whatever that organization's doing, and be able to bring a bigger picture, and then be able to honestly say how that informs this position that's maybe open.
We're getting close to the noon hour, and we have a couple of people who want to have some dialogue. So if you'd come to the microphone and let our panelists have conversation with you.
Just want to ask about volunteering and people you see in those different roles. So often, at least in my journey, I've always volunteered for things that I was underqualified for and had zero clue about. But I always wanted to exceed beyond belief. And then every job, just like you were saying, that I was asked to participate or asked to apply for came from a volunteership. So can you speak, do you notice when volunteers are amazing? And how do you see people getting involved in things that is selfless and who take it to an extreme in a good way? Does that make sense?
I think I can speak to that. For 10 years, I supervised a large pool of volunteers. As the coordinator of marriage ministry, we had pre-Cana and Focus and Discovery and a lot of couples who were volunteering for that work. And many of them came with a ministerial calling, and it was evident in their application. Some, were looking for something easy to do, and so the training had to be to let them know that this wasn't an easy ministry, but it could be a fulfilling ministry. In my current work, I find that I run into a few different types. One person is, just that person who's a giver, a doer, wants to work and wants to be involved in the life of the church and has lots to give. I run into some people who need a life, you know, and they like sitting on boards and panels and like taking up space. And those are oftentimes the people who don't make room for new, fresh ideas. That's not how we do things, you know. And to be able to kindly, gently, but clearly weed that out and to make room at the table for those people who are willing to learn something. You don't have to be perfect at it. You don't have to bring all the expertise, but you have to bring an openness, a willingness to give and to serve, and see yourself in what I call is developing a ministerial identity, that I'm here to serve. And if I'm here to serve, it's not about me. It's got to be about the people I'm serving, you know. And to the degree that it is about me, it's not ministry. So if I'm offended or I'm not getting my proper respect, well, that's about me, you know. And I need to get past that.
Just as a matter of curiosity, how many of you had volunteering as the path that brought you here today? Yeah, and I thank you for raising that, because I think that that's critical and maybe would be another topic for a CTU panel at some point in time, is volunteering as a path to ministry. Our next speaker.
Oh, wow. My name's Tiffany. First of all, I would like to know where you DJ at, because I think I could have been the next American Idol. But I'm too old at this point, so I could come have fun.
I'll give a shameless plug later.
Okay. Second, this is kind of my second career path. Is there anything you all would do differently? If you think about it now, or would you not do anything differently, because that's all what led you to be here today?
I can jump in on this. I think I came late to the game of like actual discernment. I was doing a lot of things because they seemed like the right things and the good things, and they were maybe prestigious, but I wasn't so much. I was more focused on what I wanted than what God was calling me to. And it's funny, everybody up here, I think, has talked about discernment except for me, and I work for an Ignatian organization. But it's such a big part of my life now. I really could not live without Ignatian spirituality, I don't think, or my life would be much less full. And so that idea of like true discernment, true listening, true awareness and openness to God's call, I think has really bared a lot of fruit in my life.
Right now, currently, I minister to, majority of the time, teenagers, 9th grade through 12th grade. And that is my passion. I love the youth. And I really cannot imagine right now me doing anything different than that. It is in the back of my mind, maybe later on in the future. Later on, I'm not that young anymore. But anyway, ministering to adults in an adult setting is something in the back of my mind. But currently, I am very, very certain this is where God wants me to be.
I wish I knew a third of what I thought I knew 30 years ago. So yeah, there's a whole lot I'd do differently if I knew then what I know now. But I do at the same time recognize that, we don't give birth to teenagers. You start with a baby, and you do the best with what you know, what you have, and you can look back and find wisdom that'll help you to make better decisions going forward. We don't get a chance to do it over. We don't. So I don't dwell on it, but yeah, I do things differently, for sure.
I think the one thing I might change in just how I approached my call to ministry was to just have more confidence that this is really something that, not just that God wanted you to do, but that it's something that you actually can do. I grew up in a community where we didn't have a lot of lay leaderships, and particularly a lot of lay leaders who could do this as a job. I remember the first time I met a youth minister, and that was his work. I said, "You get paid for this? This is like a thing that they do as Catholics?" And it really was just a really life-changing moment to recognize that not only does God call people to this, but God may call you to do it. And so, for all of you here, I think you've already made that first step, but to recognize you don't always know exactly what it is that God is calling you to do. But if an opportunity arises, be confident in the fact that this is probably where God wants you to be, right here, right now. And if you are in that dialogue with him, if you are in that discernment process, you will hear that voice and know that that's exactly where you need to be.